At 2:17 a.m., I pulled into a deserted rest area along Interstate 70. There was only one other vehicle in the parking lot. When I came back from the bathroom, I saw a man sitting in the driver's seat of that vehicle. He was staring directly at me. And the strangest part was, I was absolutely certain the vehicle had been empty 5 minutes earlier. Welcome to True Horror Vault. The deeper the night gets, the different America's highways begin to feel. During the day, thousands of people travel these roads. But after midnight, those same highways can become long stretches of darkness, distant headlights, truck engines, and silence. And scattered along those highways are small rest areas. Some have bright lights. Some have vending machines. Some have nothing more than a bathroom, a few parking spaces, and a security camera. And sometimes, something happens there that has no easy explanation. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. This story is not being presented as a verified historical event or an official police report. It is a fictionalized horror account inspired by realistic American highway situations and the kinds of frightening encounters that can happen in isolated places. Because sometimes, the most frightening thing hiding in the darkness isn't a ghost. It's another person. Let's begin with the first story. My name is Jason Miller. This happened during the last week of October. At the time, I was driving from Kansas toward Colorado. It had already been a long night. I had been on the road for almost 7 hours, and as the night got later, the highway became almost completely empty. It was 1:52 a.m. when I saw a rest area sign ahead. I decided to stop for a few minutes. I needed coffee, and honestly, my eyes were getting heavy. I pulled into the rest area. The parking lot was almost completely empty. There were a few semi-trucks parked on one side. Most of their engines were off. There was no one outside. At the far end of the parking lot, I noticed an old white SUV. I parked my car, turned off the engine, and sat there for a few seconds. I looked around. Everything seemed normal. A few yellow lights were glowing outside the rest area building. There was a white fluorescent light above the bathroom entrance, flickering slightly. The air smelled like dry grass and cold pavement. I got out of the car and locked the doors. Then I started walking toward the bathroom. That's when I saw the man for the first time. He was standing about 30 feet away from my car. Black jacket, black baseball cap, both hands in his pockets. His head was slightly lowered. I assumed he was a truck driver, so I didn't think much of it. I walked into the bathroom. There was nobody inside. It was completely silent. I washed my hands, looked at myself in the mirror, and stayed there for maybe a minute. Then I walked back outside. The first thing I did was look toward my car. Then I stopped. The man was gone. I looked around. Nothing. I figured he had probably gone back to his vehicle. So I started walking toward my car. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. Nobody was there. Just an empty parking lot. I started walking again. 5 or 6 steps later, I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of shoes hitting the concrete. This time, I turned around completely. Nothing. My chest felt strangely tight. I told myself, Jason, you're tired. I reached my car and pulled out my keys. I unlocked the door. And that's when I looked toward the white SUV at the other end of the parking lot. I froze. There was someone sitting inside it, in the driver's seat. Black jacket, black baseball cap. The man was looking directly at me. I stared at him for several seconds. Then I got into my car and locked the doors. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there. The man didn't move. 1 minute passed. Then another. Finally, the SUV's headlights came on. I thought he was about to leave, but he didn't. He simply turned on the headlights and remained there. Something about it felt wrong. I started my engine. I shifted into gear. Then I drove toward the highway. I looked in my rearview mirror. The white SUV was still sitting there. For a moment, I felt relieved. I thought maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But about 10 minutes later, I looked in the mirror again. My stomach dropped. The white SUV was behind me. At first, I couldn't believe it. I increased my speed. The SUV increased its speed too. I moved into the right lane. It moved into the right lane. I moved into the left lane. A few seconds later, it moved into the left lane too. That's when I knew. I wasn't imagining it. The driver was following me. I looked ahead and saw an exit leading toward a small town. I took it. The SUV followed me. I pulled into a gas station. The SUV stopped about 20 or 30 feet behind me. I didn't move. Neither did the SUV. Then, after a few seconds, it slowly drove forward. I watched it in my rearview mirror as it turned at the intersection and disappeared. I stayed inside my car for almost 5 minutes. Then I went into the gas station and told the employee what had happened. He listened quietly. Then he said, "Don't go back to that rest area tonight." I asked him why. He just shrugged. Then he said, "Some people use those places because they know nobody's watching." That night, I drove to a hotel. After that, I never stopped alone at a deserted rest area in the middle of the night. But the most disturbing part came later. A few weeks afterward, I was traveling along the same route during the daytime. When I passed that same rest area, I noticed a small notice board near the roadside. I didn't stop, but from a distance, I could see a photograph of a white SUV. Underneath it were the words, "Suspicious vehicle reported." The date was 2 days before the night I had been there. I still don't know who that man was. I don't know why he followed me. And I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't driven directly onto the highway. But there's one thing that still bothers me. When I came out of the bathroom and first looked toward my car, I thought the man had been standing behind me. Later, I realized something. He had actually been standing near my car, which meant he had already noticed where I parked before I even entered the bathroom. And that's why, whenever I have to stop at a deserted rest area at night, I don't check the bathroom first. I check the parking lot. Because if someone is watching you in the darkness, you may not see them until they've already been watching you for a long time. At 3:11 a.m., I pulled into a rest stop in Nevada. When I walked into the bathroom, every stall was empty. I entered the last stall. A few seconds later, a man's voice came from the stall beside me. Very quietly, he said, "Sir, please don't leave." I froze because I was absolutely certain there had been nobody else inside the bathroom when I entered. My name is Mark Reynolds. This happened in the middle of July. At the time, I was driving from Phoenix towards Salt Lake City. It was an extremely hot night. I had been driving to Nevada desert for almost 3 hours, and I had just finished the last of my water. It was 2:55 a.m. when I saw a rest area sign ahead. I was exhausted, so I decided to stop. I pulled into the rest area. The place was almost completely empty. There was a pickup truck parked in the distance, and a semi-truck on the other side of the parking lot. I couldn't see a single person. I locked my car and walked toward the bathroom. When I opened the door, a blast of cold air hit my face. I stepped inside. There were 6 stalls. Every single one was open. Not one was occupied. I walked over to the sinks. I washed my hands and looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. Then I entered one of the last stalls and closed the door. About 10 seconds later, I heard something. Click. It sounded like someone touching the stall door beside me. I didn't say anything. Then I heard it again. Click, click. I assumed someone else had entered the bathroom. Then I heard a man's voice, very quietly. "Sir." I froze. The man said, "Please don't leave." My first thought was that maybe someone was sick. I said, "Are you okay?" No answer. I waited a few seconds. Then I asked, "Do you need help?" Again, nothing. I looked down toward the gap beneath the stall door. I tried to see into the stall next to me, but I couldn't see anyone. And then I realized something. There were no shoes. The stall was empty. I immediately opened my door and stepped out. The entire bathroom was empty. There wasn't a single person inside. I stood in front of the mirror for several seconds. Then I told myself that I had probably heard something outside. Maybe the sound had echoed through the bathroom. I turned toward the exit, and then the voice came again. "Sir." I turned around. Nobody was there, But this time I knew I hadn't imagined it. The voice had definitely come from inside the bathroom. I opened the door and walked outside. I started walking toward my car. That's when I noticed a pickup truck in the distance. A man was standing beside it. He was wearing a black hoodie, and he was looking directly at me. I stopped walking. He stopped too. Then he slowly opened the pickup's door and got inside. I quickly reached my car. I locked the doors and started the engine. But before driving away, I looked back toward the bathroom. The door was still open. The lights were still on. I drove out of the rest area. About 10 minutes later, I found a gas station. I pulled over. I went inside and asked the employee, "Do you know if there's a police station nearby?" He looked at me. "Everything okay?" I told him what had happened. He listened. Then I told him which rest area I had been at. His expression changed immediately. He became quiet. Then he said, "Don't go back there." I asked, "Why?" He said, "That place has cameras." I was confused. "Then what's the problem?" He looked at me and said, "Sometimes people hide around the building. They know where the cameras don't reach." Then he advised me to contact the police. I left the gas station and drove to a hotel. The next morning, I called the local police department's non-emergency number. I explained what had happened. They asked me several questions. I told them about the pickup truck, but I didn't have enough information to identify the man, so there wasn't much they could do. Eventually, the conversation ended. I thought that was the end of it. At least, I hoped it was. About 2 months later, I was driving along the same highway again. This time, it was during the day. As I passed the rest area, I remember that night. I didn't stop, but I noticed something from the highway. There were several security cameras installed near the back wall of the bathroom, and suddenly I had a question. If someone really had been watching me that night, where had he been standing? I had only been inside the bathroom for a few minutes. If someone had followed me inside, I should have seen him. Then I remembered something. There had been no shoes underneath the last stall, which meant the voice probably hadn't come from inside that stall. Someone could have been standing somewhere behind the building, or perhaps someone had deliberately tried to frighten me. I'll never know for sure, but there's one thing from that night that I still remember clearly. As I drove away from the rest area, I looked into my rearview mirror one last time. A man was standing outside the bathroom, black hoodie, head lowered, completely motionless. He was watching my car, and as I drove farther away, he continued staring. I don't know who he was. I don't know what he wanted, and I don't know whether he intended to hurt me. But I do know one thing. You don't need a ghost to be afraid at a deserted highway rest area. A stranger is enough, because sometimes the darkest thing around you isn't the darkness itself. It's the thought that someone could be standing inside it, watching you, while you have absolutely no idea where they are. The highway may look like nothing more than a road, a way to get from one place to another. But the isolated rest areas scattered along those highways can sometimes put us face to face with people we know absolutely nothing about. So if you ever have to stop at a deserted rest area late at night, take a moment to look around. Pay attention to the parking lot. Lock your doors. And if something feels wrong, don't ignore that feeling, because fear isn't always imagination. Sometimes, fear is the last warning your instincts give you before something goes wrong. You are listening to True Horror Vault. I'll be back with more dark, realistic, and disturbing stories. Until then, drive safely at night. And if you ever stop somewhere isolated, make sure you're really alone, because the highway never truly sleeps. Good night.